As we approach Veterans Day 2021, we do so with a stark problem that is striking and shameful to the extent that there's something we can do about it, and that is the suicide rate among veterans in this country. And let's talk about that with your calls at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626, and with our guest, an entrepreneur, author, and also survivor of the Bosnian War, Maja Kazazic. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me on, Jim.
And did I say the name halfway correctly?
You said it perfectly. Good
job. That's good to hear. What are the statistics regarding veteran suicide in the United States right now?
So the rate of suicides for United States is about 31.6%. And
well, 31.6. Obviously, not a third of veterans are committing suicide. What is that figure? What does that refer to?
So the adult suicide total 45,000 in the U.S. With a rate of 80% per 100,000 people. And for the veterans, that was almost double, 31%. So yeah, it's a lot of people. I mean, and this is measured per 100,000. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not talking about percentages here. We're talking about number of people per 100,000. So the figure for the general public per 100,000, not as a percentage, but as just a number, was what you said.
Was 18 versus
18 per 100,000, and for veterans,
31.6%.
35.6 per 100,000. So not a percentage. No, that would be unbelievably tragic. Yeah, exactly. Do we have a handle on why? I mean, we do have we have counseling services available in the military, depending, of course, on where you're stationed. And we have, of course, a Veterans Administration where much money is spent to attend to the ails and ills of veterans, physical and mental. So we are told. Who's dropping the ball here?
Well, it's hard to tell, Jim, because there are several issues that play in fact here. One is that the type of PTSD and trauma that veterans face is very different than what an average person might face. So, the feeling of that isolation is when they come back from the combat, they come back here. Typically, you'll have maybe one serviceman that is in the family. So it's hard for them to find support and they feel isolated. Another thing is that there's a stigma associated with veterans and in the military, that image that they have to play a strong, confident role, and being seen as weak, someone who can't handle it is also something that they struggle with more so than an average person. And they also deal a lot with survivor's guilt, something that it's very difficult, and they've seen things that most people have not seen. So when you come back, you feel very isolated, and that's a huge, huge risk factor for suicides.
Interesting, that macho notion that I can't admit to any weakness. I guess I had sort of thought that must have diminished at least somewhat in 2021. I mean, that's incredibly wrong, obviously. I mean, everybody is susceptible to feelings of depression, and particularly people in circumstances where post-traumatic stress disorder can be fairly common. I'm, I guess, somewhat surprised that that's still the view out there. I'm not a man. I can't take it. I mean, really? Is that seriously that common now?
Well, it's still a huge issue. It's still a huge issue. There's just a lot of stigma associated with it because people feel that, people feel weak. I mean, throughout the workforce and everywhere, we have sort of capitalized on this image of strength and power, powering through all the problems and not having feelings and keeping yourself put together no matter what's happening to you in your life. And it's very hard to undo that. I think it's going to take more than several years of good PR around, a good mental health stigma and not being macho and having men having feelings. It's going to take a little bit more than that for people to actually feel comfortable to come forward and say, hey, I'm really hurting and I need help. And that's another issue that we all face. We are not taught to ask for help. That's very difficult for most of us to do.
Well, perhaps it's not difficult for me if I think I need help, I ask. I mean, I find that interesting that is a prevalent circumstance. I mean, maybe I'm just different. I don't know, but if I need help, I mean, for example, I'm not like your typical male who supposedly won't ask directions. I consider it a sign of weakness that I get lost, so I ask directions immediately. But anyway, be that as it may, these are some of the things. Now then, are the authorities, either in the active duty military or the Veterans Administration, are they addressing these issues?
They absolutely are. Our Biden administration has actually created a plan to help with these issues and improvement, and they have come up with a strategy to address this. Also, the Veterans Administration, I mean, they are actually working hard on it. The problem has now been is that they're overwhelmed. Our mental health system was tasked to begin with prior to the pandemic, and now with the pandemic everything has gotten worse. So now there's a lot of waiting and trying to get in line for help and things like that. So everybody's struggling to help, but everybody is helping. It's kind of all hands on deck time now.
All right. Very good. This has been happening for some time now. I've been reading stories about veteran suicides for at least the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, and that's just things that came to my attention. I wasn't actively searching for it or researching it per se. Do we have a point at which this began to, for want of a better term, get out of hand? Was there a point at which you could say this is becoming a problem?
Well, in 2007, it had sort of dipped, and it was actually better. But since 2010, we have seen a huge increase, especially now with the COVID. And I can say that since 2010, there have been 65,000 veterans who have died by suicide, which, just for the reference, is more than the total number of deaths of both combat during the Vietnam War, the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan all combined. So it's almost like this domestic war that they're actually fighting once they come home. So the number has been increasing. And as I mentioned, COVID has not helped that with the isolation. Yeah. I mean, that has been the case with the general population, but with veterans even more so.
Right. Are there anything we can say about the particular veterans who are susceptible to suicide in terms of, where they're stationed, what kind of duty they're performing? Are they in a combat zone back when we were actively fighting in various wars? Age, race, sex, whatever. Are we able to pinpoint some veterans as more susceptible than others to suicide?
Not among veterans. I mean, any of those posts are going to cause traumatic, events, and it really is very personal thing and how it affects different people. Different people deal with it differently. So among them, there is really not one group that's more susceptible than the others. What seems to be the case is isolation and having a support system when they get back that's intact that actually helps them get through.
All right. Very good. 1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626, as we have a severely high rate of suicides among veterans, 35.6 per 100,000, which is almost double that of the national average for adults. It is a problem, and it has to be addressed. Here's a call from Bob in Battlefield, Missouri. Hello, Bob.
Good evening, Jim Bohannon. Thank you for your service to our country. And, of course, Branson, Missouri has tens on tens of thousands of veterans coming in. Tomorrow's Veterans Day. And, Lord, we do want to say thank you to all the veterans for their work. And one thing I would offer, I've been working as a minister and in the music business with veterans for 30 years in Branson, traveling and stuff. Jesus is still the answer, and I want to urge the churches to reach out to these veterans. Last thing is there's still 24 a day taking their life. Thank you, Jimmy. Bye.
All right. I haven't done the math on how many per day. I don't know. Do you know, Maja Kazazic?
How many per day?
He said
I
24 per
17.
day. That seems like a lot, but then again, maybe not.
It's 17 per day.
17
actually.
per day. Okay,
17
there you
per
go.
day. Yeah.
All right, which is
close.
still terrible, but not as bad as 24. All right. Steve in Atlanta. Hello, Steve.
Jim, thanks for taking the call.
Yes, sir.
I want to hear something out of Maja, right? Maja?
The name is Maja. Yes, that's her name. Yes, Maja.
Were you nervous when you said the 30-something% at first, or?
Well, it was just a slip of the tongue. I mean, it's not.
To be honest, it was slip of the tongue because I've been working with percentages all day. And so I just as soon as I say 31.6, automatically the percent came in, but it is actually 31.6 the number. And I apologize for that.
Well, it's not a major point. We clarified it. So what else is on your mind, Steve?
No, that's it.
Well, okay. We clarified it. William in Topeka, Kansas. Hello, William.
One veteran to the next. So thank you for your service.
And to you too. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I went through basic back in '85, and then I went through AIT in '86. And when
for those who don't know, the terms basic training, of course, and advanced individual training, that's where in the military you learn your specialty, whatever it is, infantry, artillery, clerk, typist, what have you, just so everybody's up to speed. William, go ahead.
And I know at that point, when we graduated, you know, the drill sergeants treat you different, and they start talking to you as a person. And they were explaining to me that we were the last class in that at Fort McClellan to go through a very strict regiment, schooling. They were going to a non-stressful environment after that. And I wonder if that has a lot to do with the suicide rates, because troops aren't being broke down like they used to. That and adults aren't adults when they graduate high school anymore. Back in the old days, 17, 16-year-old kids were pretty much mature adults at that time. And now they're saying that adults aren't adults until they hit about 26 to 30.
Well, I'm not sure who's saying that. I mean, different people may be saying that, but I would agree with you that although we have young people who have produced our fine military, we also have young people who have been defined as snowflakes. So your point is well taken, William. I don't know if Maja knows. I don't know. I know I took part in the old system of screaming in your face that we have seen portrayed in such movies as Full Metal Jacket, and they have toned that back considerably. I don't know, Maja, if the end of such training has anything to do or any comparable timeline with the increase in suicide rates. I personally felt that the screaming probably did prepare me for stressful situations pretty well. I didn't go through the sanitized, revised version, so I don't know. Your thoughts?
I do have some thoughts on that. I don't know any of the studies that have been done, and that's something definitely fascinating we should look into and see how it actually affects suicide rates and among certain groups. But I do have an opinion based on my knowledge in this subject, and that is that things like that do actually prepare you for it. Let's take my life, for example. As a 16-year-old, I was hanging out with 5 of my friends. A bomb exploded, killed all of my friends, and I was severely injured.
This is when you were in Bosnia, right?
When I was in Bosnia, and I was 16 years old, and my leg was amputated without anesthesia. I had over 100 surgeries. So all this stuff going through as a 16-year-old prepared me. So when the pandemic happened now in 2019, 2020, I was prepped. I was ready to go. It was like a vacation, right? Because after genocide, that feels like a vacation. But for those who have had, to say, cushy lives and never had anything difficult happen to them, this felt like a prison. So to your point, yes, if you have difficult things and harsh things happen to you at a younger age, you learn to deal with it. You don't learn how to deal with the obstacles. You learn how to go through these challenges. So when they actually happen in the real life, you're actually better prepared. And I think there is some good point to that to be made, where you actually create these stressful environments where you train individuals how to act and react under stressors that you can control. So when you go into real life combat, you're actually better prepared.
You, of course, were in an actual real life circumstance. In Bosnia, there was a war going on. Do you feel that you were, at a young age, a victim of post traumatic stress?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Did you ever feel the need to did you ever have the desire to commit suicide?
Yes, absolutely. So after 15 years that it took me to recover from my injuries and what happened to me, I was hit with the horrific PTSD that left me completely non-functional. I was claustrophobic, agoraphobic at the same time. I was afraid to eat. I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid to drive. I was really non-functional, and suicide did cross my mind. The
Wow.
key thing for me then was having this amazing support system around me. And I was fortunate enough to have that, and also to have some training in this background and with the mental health training, and the people that were around me also had similar training. So that helped a great deal. And going through this PTSD is what forced me and what made me feel that I need to bring light. That's why I became mental health advocate, because this is almost like a silent disease.
Again, I have never personally felt the desire to commit suicide. I've been depressed, but I mean, in it all, I've just never been in a circumstance where I've faced such immense psychological pressures or great physical pain. It just never reached that point in my life that I said to myself, "This has got to stop." I mean, I bring sympathy to the subject, but not empathy. I just haven't been there. And let's talk to Dan, who calls in from Southwest Tennessee. Hello.
Good evening, sir. Well,
Good
thank
evening.
you all so much. Ma'am, guest there, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I wish I had been through there to protect you or something, but, I wasn't. But, hey, you're dealing with it well. Anyways, that aside, I'd like to say to start off with, so you know who you talk to, I'm a disabled vet. But a little bit of insight on where it goes. I've wrestled with this over the years. I really have. And here you are. You're living in a civilian society. You're doing things, whether you go in young, right after high school, or going a little bit older. Then you go in the military. And they tear you down in basic and build you back up so you're a soldier or whatever.
And as the previous caller noted, Dan, quite accurately, that may be what you and I experienced. They've toned that back considerably, but please continue.
Actually, at the time I went through, I beg to differ. I think it was an idea they had at the time, but we went through it. It ain't no
When did you go through basic training, if I might ask?
Well, I'll tell you in a second, but I want to add to that. You didn't know what you was up for. I didn't know what I was up for. And the previous caller didn't know what he's up for. The kids that are going in there don't know what they're up for. They're volunteering and going for the unknown. It might be easier than what we went through, but they're standing on our shoulders. So,
well, granted, it's not easy by any standard other than what it used to be. You're right. Less stressful, yes, but still, the average civilian placed in a basic training environment would find it quite stressful, even today. You're right.
Yeah, I didn't want to get on that subject.
Well, whatever. Okay, go ahead with what you intend to talk
I
about.
agree with you. I think they've toned it down too much. I think they've toned it down too much. I think basic needs to be more severe like old days. Okay, I do believe that. Because you ain't going to have a timeout card in combat. You ain't going to be able to take that.
That's true.
Well, actually, I withdraw that, because if you research history, the powers that be, Civil War, World War I, World War II, combating people, they would be fighting each other, and then all of a sudden they go out, play cards, visit with each other, and they
Well, that happens on occasion, but not in every conflict. But in some circumstances, yes. But in general, no. There are no timeout cards in combat. Maybe if the two groups of combatants have previous associations, such as in a civil war. But thank you for your service, Dan, and your thoughts. Vince in Jacksonville, North Carolina, joins us now. Hello, Vince.
Hey, Jimbo. First off, you said you were in the service. What branch?
The Army.
Outstanding. I'm a retired Marine. I was only able to do 10 years before I got blown up a couple times. I got medically retired. I've been retired since 2009.
Yeah, I was just in for one stretch back in 1966 to 70, a long time ago.
Hey, time in. But this is a situation that the whole thing with us veterans that I've been grappling with since before I was retired. Since I've retired, I've done a lot to try and immerse myself in things to try and keep my head out of the feelings, the intrusive thoughts, the anxiety, even the anger and frustration with our own people and their indifference to things and our government and the constant mistakes they made. And in the 20 years,
did these contribute to a feeling of depression or hopelessness with you, Vince? I'm just curious what you went through. You were wounded, so
and it's not just me, because I volunteer in certain places around here, Jacksonville, North Carolina, big military presence here with the Marine Corps base and whatnot.
Oh yeah,
and the trend is the feeling of not so much empathy. The empathy is out there. There's the people saying thank you for your service, and they mean it. But then, for instance, myself and a lot of fellow veterans, I was picking up phones and calling people, and they're calling me after the whole Afghanistan debacle. And I fought in Iraq during the invasion, and I didn't go over to Afghanistan, but to watch what happened, and then to see how catastrophic it ended, and it's crickets now. It's as if it never happened. 20 years of fighting, and I am sitting here left to ask myself, you know what? The politicians did this all day. Did it to my father when he was fighting in Vietnam. They're doing the same thing when I have family members fighting in the Korean War. Politics and everything like that, when it comes to war, it's the same. It's been the same since Korea. But the one thing that's changed is our people. We don't feel like there's, by and large, a lot of us are angry that the American people aren't fighting as hard for us here at home as we fought for them over there.
I understand your thoughts, and I'd like our guest to respond. Maja?
Well, when it comes to suicide in general, that includes veteran suicide, it's not only one thing that becomes a factor to commit suicide. It's always a list of things that lead up to that. And I am sure that going overseas, serving, protecting the country, and then coming back here and seeing the despair and feeling like it was a thankless job where, someone gets blown up like yourself, and then you're sitting at home and thinking, wait, why did all this happen? And it seems like, there's so many issues in the government and what the politicians are doing. Yes, I am sure that definitely is one of the contributive factors to feeling that hopelessness, to feeling like my life doesn't really matter, and that eventually might lead to enough things that commit suicide.
Michael in Ottawa, Illinois, joins us now. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Jim. Hi, Maja. I just want to say, hi.
Yes.
I've observed a couple of Marines that do a radio show here in LaSalle, and they're a really tight family. They're incredibly there for each other, and they're all about survival. So here you have a group that has always had something to fight with, and then you take the rifle out of their hands, so to speak. Well, what you're doing, Jim, tonight is kind of like giving them something to fight with. It's talking, it's interaction, and getting to know what Maja's experienced and talked about. And that gives them something that they're used to There's a couple of Marines here. LaSalle County is like 90% veteran. It's a county about 100 miles west of Chicago. There's these two great guys, Jerry Bassador and Chris Mueller, and they said, look, they took this into their own hands. They said, we've got all these vets in LaSalle County, all over the country. What they need to do is talk, and they celebrate the triumphs. You know, one of the guys has a horse farm, and the horses kind of interact with the vets who need to interact with an animal who can understand them better than we can, and then they walk them through the valleys, and it's WRWO.org. It's a local community radio, and I encourage all the vets all across the country is maybe find a community radio station in your town or state, and you'll be amazed at all the vets that will call in and talk to you, and either vets you knew that you served with, or just an anonymous vet who likes your show. And if they can just talk about it, it really helps them through their suicidal thoughts and their intrusive thoughts.
That sounds like an excellent idea. Maya?
That is a wonderful, wonderful idea. I mean, the number one thing that people need in this type of situation is support system around them. Having someone who understands them, someone who is willing to listen, who is going to show them the ropes and help them get out of there. And that is an absolutely wonderful idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that very much. We go to Ken in McCleary, Washington now. Hello, Ken.
Hey, how are you doing tonight, Jimbo?
We're well,
thank you for your service.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And Miss Maya, I like the counseling part that you do, you're accredited for. My son was sitting on my couch when 9/11 happened. He was like 2 weeks out of boot, and then he got deployed. And he had multiple deployments, and he made it to Master Sergeant. And
wow, that's quite an achievement. For those who don't know, that's high up in the enlisted ranks. That indicates a great deal of perseverance and motivation.
Yeah, exactly. What is that, Jimbo? That's like an E6 or something like that?
No. Master Sergeant is E8, one step below Sergeant Major.
Yeah, and the thing about it that kind of bugs me is his entire adult life. He retired. He put his 20 in. But in that 20, I'd have to say 85% of it was war. I mean, he was in combat. And that's got to mess with someone's head.
Well, I dare say that the percentage of people who have been in combat, probably the percentage of those with at least a residual form of PTSD is pretty high. I don't have the numbers. Maya, any thoughts?
I don't have the numbers for that, but that 85% of 20 years seems like a really high number.
Boy, it certainly does.
I would imagine,
every conflict that was out there, yeah.
That will definitely leave something in him, and I'm hoping. It sounds like you guys are really close, and as long as he has a wonderful, and sounds like he does, there's a wonderful support system, family around him. That's what stops you from committing suicide, and that helps with the depression, anxiety, and everything else.
Yeah, and out of the service now and retired. Why, that's helpful as well. To Frank in Cumberland, Maryland now. Hello, Frank.
Well, you're right. We certainly do need the numbers. I became very upset. This has been public knowledge for several years now. I became very upset, and I looked into it. What I found was that the majority of people, to my knowledge anyway, who were committing suicide were the older veterans. They weren't the combat veterans. And please remember, most veterans are not like Ms. Kazazic. Most people in the service never see action, and it's a pretty nice ride for most veterans.
Well, for most veterans, you are correct. The majority of veterans never see actual combat. That's correct. So anyway, thoughts, Maya?
Well, I mean, I don't know how the military has it split up into who sees combat, who doesn't, but definitely those that are faced with that. And I would also venture the guess that there are, because I know few veterans and few military folks who are not going to combat. They're sort of in offices, if you will. And there's a huge component of survivor's guilt associated with that because they feel like they're not doing enough. Oh, I'm sitting in a business office and getting supplies and getting all this stuff done. So I'm not
Right.
doing enough. I should be doing more. So there's the stigma attached with that as well. But I do want to say, I have to say, because the odds of this are really small, the gentleman that called us from Cumberland, Maryland, I was evacuated from Bosnia for medical treatment, and I was transferred to Cumberland, Maryland, and that's where I was and got my treatment in Cumberland,
Oh,
Maryland,
wow. Well, interesting.
by a group called Veterans for Peace. They have actually formed a chapter, Veterans for Peace, and they were older veterans, and they had actually brought me to Cumberland so I can receive treatment there.
Wow, that's interesting to know. I'm
Small
familiar
world.
with the town of Cumberland, Maryland, but didn't know what all was happening there. Chris in Beulah, North Dakota. Good evening.
Oh, yes. Happy Veterans Day to both of you, and thanks for your service.
Thank you.
Question I have, we could dab into this a little bit. What are the veterans, obviously different types of severity of PTSD or suicide? Are they being treated with different types of drugs? Are they being treated with different types of ECT? Are they?
I'm sorry. What was that last part? I didn't know the initials.
ECT, sorry, electroconvulsive therapy. They used to do that. My uncle was a vet from the Korean War. I don't know what his issues were. Never did dab into it.
Right.
I would take him to the VA hospital every couple months. They would do ECTs on his brain. Do they still do that to the?
I don't. That's an interesting question. And now let's ask our guest. I'm not sure that she knows either. I honestly don't know what's involved in the treatment of veterans in this regard. Maya, do you?
I don't. I certainly don't treat veterans and provide that service. However, I do know that there are different modalities and for treating this kind of stuff, and it's very, very specific to an individual. So it's going to be custom to somebody might need medication, somebody might need. So the new thing is the EMDR techniques, which are really very helpful. So it's just really individualized, I think.
Okay. To Gary in Leon, Kansas. Good evening, Gary.
Hello, Mr. Bohannon.
Hi.
Yeah.
What's on your mind, Gary?
What?
I just wondered what was on your mind tonight.
Oh, what's on my mind? You were talking about suicides that were taking place today.
Yeah.
It really kind of aggravated me. I'm a Vietnam War veteran.
And thank you for your service and welcome home, by the way, but go ahead.
Yeah, right. Anyway, you were in Vietnam, right?
That is correct, yes.
And what was your MOS?
98 Charlie 20 by MOS, that's Military Occupational Specialty, which is what's your job. I was in military intelligence.
Oh.
I was with the 199th Light Infantry Brigade. And, yeah, I was shot at and shot back, so...
99th Infantry, Light Infantry.
The 199th Light Infantry, yes, that's correct.
What I'm getting at is you're talking about all this suicide of these boys.
Right.
There was that has been going on since the time began.
Well, there has been always suicide for people in combat. We note that the numbers have gone up in recent years.
Well, let me tell you, there was 59,000 Vietnam veterans killed in combat in Vietnam.
Yes.
By 1977, more than that number had committed suicide by 1977. Nothing back then never was said about this. They talked about it a little bit. That was it. And it kind of went quiet after that. But
well, I'm not sure what the figures were from that era. That seems high, but then again, I don't know. I'll defer to our guest, Maya.
I don't know from that era. I have no idea what was happening in 70s.
No, I'm afraid I don't either, but suffice it to say, yes, a serious problem to be sure. One good Gary deserves another. This Gary is in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Hi, Gary.
Jim. My comment, also hello to your guest as well, and happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
My comment is simply that George W. Bush, who I generally supported, of course, in many things, I think he made a very big mistake, though, in that, for example, when he would describe our soldiers fighting in the mountains of Afghanistan, he would use the phrase, "That's really hard work." And I think he was describing it as work instead of war to make it more palatable to the American people. But I also think it sort of diminished the severity and the sacrifice of what the soldiers were doing. They weren't delivering letters in the mountains of Afghanistan. They weren't, making food or any. They were, but I mean, they were fighting a war. Yes. And I really feel like that was another contributor to the subtle shift in why the American people maybe did not treat does not take our combat veteran issues as seriously. Because
I don't know. I don't remember that particular comment from President Bush. Anyway, if you're on the line, we'll get your calls next hour. And Maya, you stay on the line. We'll speak off air. I'm Jim Bohannon, and this is Westwood One.